Make mistakes. It's how you grow. I'm sorry, your grades just aren't good enough for medical school. If you're not failing, you're not learning. Unfortunately, we have to let you go. You're just not performing where others are. Try it. If it doesn't work out, try something new. Did you hear? She quit her job for the 3rd time in 4 years. She just can't cut it. The reality is we live in a world where both of these narratives exist. The encouragement to learn from your mistakes and grow, but the pressure to perform well from the start to achieve success. It's like there's some age where making mistakes go from being learning opportunities to harming your career. It's not surprising to hear that Deloitte's 2024 Gen Z survey showed that 46% of Gen Zs say they feel anxious or stressed all or most of the time, with failing to meet career expectations being the primary driver. Academics in early career just don't feel like they're built for failing in a safe way. So how are we supposed to learn the hard lessons and figure out who we are? This is where I found myself at the beginning of my graduate studies at MIT. I'd achieved enough success in undergrad here at Queen's to earn a full ride to one of the top institutions in the world. But if you asked me to describe the things that made me me, you'd receive my resume in verbal form. My proudest moments had been built around my degree. So who was I as I started over, at a new school, in a new country, with the weight of this opportunity on my shoulders? I knew that to answer these questions, I'd have to make mistakes and challenge myself, but undergrad had reinforced that fitting into the mold was how I achieved success. I was afraid that trying my own path or finding something new would take that success away. On top of that, I wasn't just afraid of the absence of success, I was afraid to fail, that one wrong move would jeopardize this incredible academic and research opportunity. In that initial isolation, I projected that fear forward. I realized if I let this fear of making mistakes or spending my time perfectly dictate my choices now, it would eventually dictate my entire life. In that moment, I wasn't just choosing how to handle grad school, I was choosing how to handle my future. And the way I saw it, there were 2 paths ahead of me. One was following the same blueprint I did during my undergrad. Take the classes I'm supposed to take, study hard, get involved, find a job, and do the things I'm supposed to do. And while that path might lead to one type of success, I was worried I may not figure out my passions if I didn't stop and think. But the other path was entirely unknown, where no blueprint existed, but maybe it was a path where I could make mistakes, fail, learn, laugh, grow, and figure out who I was. I like to think my brain operates on a use it or lose it principle. If I stop seeking novelty, my brain will be less capable of learning and adapting. After all, a knife that's never used still gets dull sitting in the drawer. I was a bit lost at the beginning of grad studies, but what I knew for certain was I didn't want to wake up 10 years from now and not know how to try something new. So I jumped headfirst into the unknown, poring over the clubs offered at MIT. For some reason that I can still only explain as a gut feeling, the MIT triathlon team kept jumping out at me. It was an opportunity to get more active, meet new people, and swim some more, something I'd always loved doing. However, unlike 3-year-old me, 22-year-old me was filled with the nerves of putting myself out there. Still, I sent an email to the team about joining and showed up for my first practice. I remember that long walk across the track towards a big group of people, wondering what they'd say when I showed up. On that walk over, I had to remind myself that everyone was new at some point, and being new is not a crime. But it didn't help that I felt so inexperienced. I hadn't run in 5 years, I didn't even own a road bike, and I was fairly certain I would be the slowest person to start. But what did it matter? No one was really watching. Being bad at triathlons wasn't going to get me kicked out of school or jeopardize a future job offer. I could go on this side quest just because and see where it takes me. For the first time, I was really enjoying learning. And that's the kicker. Humans are hardwired for learning. Alex Hutchinson talks about this in his book, The Explorer Gene. Our brains are set up to seek new information and skills to reduce future uncertainty. We're naturally curious to try new things, but that curiosity is easily snuffed out by the fear of repercussions if we fail. Researchers call that evaluation apprehension. Our performance and willingness to experiment drop the moment we feel judged by others. But where could this side quest take me if I dared to push myself, if I let go of this fear of failing or making mistakes? As this question rolled around my brain, it was actively bumping up against my internal monitor. See, it seems our behavior has this built-in mechanism that controls performance. This internal monitor follows an upside-down U shape. Too little pressure and we get bored. How many of you have picked up a hobby only to drop it after a few days or weeks? It's not because we were too stressed, but it's because we got bored. No stress to inspire action. We were on the left side of this performance curve. Now, let's imagine the right side. Say someone came up to you and gave you 1 week to learn a song on an instrument you don't even play. This is so stressful and feels like you've lost before you start, so I bet you wouldn't bother trying. In this case, we've fallen over the performance curve and just shut down. But between these examples is a goal where a healthy amount of stress exists, one where we can optimize our performance. This zone is what I like to call the stretch zone. The most I can stretch and push and pull myself without falling to either side. This is also the zone where we experience the most growth and see the most rapid changes in who we are. I wanted to take my side quest of joining the triathlon team and turn it into a stretch goal to put myself in this zone. So I decided, I'm going to complete an Ironman within the first 12 months of my degree. A somewhat niche triathlon term, an Ironman's a race where athletes complete a 3.8-kilometer swim, a 180-kilometer bike, and a marathon under a certain cutoff time, usually about 17 hours. For me, this goal sat in my stretch zone. It would be challenging, but possible, with some unknowns. So I knew that my nerves had vanished just a couple weeks into training, but why? I was motivated to do things, and I was feeling passionate, but all of it had disappeared. I had fallen into the comfort zone. Several weeks into training, those pressure and the unknown had vanished, leading me to shut down. So when setting goals, research suggests that our brain is motivated by reward behaviors, and this reward system fuels motivation. But something with people who are diagnosed with clinical depression is that their brains are extra complex. This means action and motivation can be extra difficult for those diagnosed. So it's important that when we're setting our unique reward systems and we're setting goals, we understand who we are. I knew that to get back into my stretch zone, I needed to reevaluate. Despite weeks of training and being passionate about this goal, I knew I wanted to push myself to maybe find my limit. So I set my sights on a goal that scared me in a good way, that made me excited again. I wanted to break a world record, to be the youngest person to complete an Ironman on all 6 inhabited continents. Now, I knew this goal was possible, as the current record was 26, and at only 22, I had my first race within my sights. But it wouldn't be easy. I'd need to train consistently, follow a race plan, prevent injury, all in a sport I had never really trained before. As daunting as this seems, I was invigorated by this goal. Suddenly, taking a break from research to train didn't feel like a chore. It felt like an opportunity. I was back in my stretch zone. But here's the thing about the stretch zone. Eventually, the novelty wears off. It's like learning to knit a sweater for someone. Buying the woolen needles is exciting. But a couple weeks in, when you're staring at a tangled mess of yarn and your hands cramp, that excitement is gone. I knew that a couple weeks into training, because it sounded fun, wasn't going to be able to keep me going. I needed something more. That's where purpose comes into play. Researchers from California State University collected data on almost 300 college students during the COVID-19 pandemic. Their research showed that persistence and resilience were positively and significantly predicted by having purpose. Additionally, actively developing your purpose emerges the most important predictor to both resilience and persistence. So not only does understanding your why am I choosing to take on this challenge, help you persist through that challenge, but actively developing it along the way does too. If purpose can help us through a global pandemic with a lower impact on our mental health, it can carry us through our stretch goals. So I was invigorated by my new goal of breaking a world record. But a couple weeks before my first race, I noticed that despite feeling invigorated by my purpose and motivated by that reward system behavior, I felt stressed at the thought of racing. Every time my race came up, I downplayed my readiness and added the caveat, if I finish. I caught myself thinking about the comments that would get made if I failed. Can you believe she flew all the way to South Africa and didn't even cross the finish line? How ridiculous. But what I'd forgotten in those moments was that I'd intentionally created a safe space to fail. By design, the judgment I may receive if I failed to cross that finish line couldn't impact my life. It wouldn't jeopardize my career prospects, my academic success, or the people who were really there to support me. I could go on this side quest just because and see where it takes me. I remember the joy of that first race. Crossing that finish line was something unlike no other. Despite the farthest bike I'd ever done, winds that caused pro athletes to crash, and pain from not fueling properly, I ran down that finish chute as fast as possible. See, I'd seen success before and done hard things, but never quite like this. I remember after the race seeing so many messages from my family and friends and feeling so loved and supported. I did then immediately fall asleep on a park bench in the rain, waiting for the Uber, but that was a moment I was grateful for my incredible race support. After that first race, the painful times and the moments of self-doubt no longer felt these negative feelings. Instead, I just felt this immense pride and happiness that I'd made it to the other side and grown along the way. So I let that joy about race number 1 translate into motivation and set my sights on race number 2. However, I soon learned that 2 other people, slightly younger than me, were working on the same goal. To break the record before them, I would need to expedite my race timeline, completing all 6 races in just under 8 months. And I dove headfirst into this new timeline, training hard while a full-time student. But 4 months into racing, it just became too much. I no longer looked forward to those training sessions, and I just felt my body was out of whack from the physical load I was putting on it. I was edging towards burnout. During that time, the simple things like putting on a load of laundry just felt impossible. The pressure of the new timeline had shoved me off of the performance cliff, and I had shut down. Reflecting on this journey, I realized that the same issues can be caused by different problems. In the case of both too little pressure, where I got a bit too bored, and the case of far too much pressure, where I was burnt out, I had less of a drive to train. Only through self-reflection that I was able to determine which side of the curve I was on, and thus what steps to take next. This time, deep in the panic zone, I realized I'd confused my goal with my purpose. My goal was to be the youngest person, but my purpose, my why, was to prove to myself I could do hard things and learn new skills, and to inspire others to take chances. I managed to take the stress of all of this failure and turn it into pride, that I was proud to be putting it all on the line. And I knew that I needed to reevaluate. I wanted to keep going. I wanted to keep at this record. But if I kept going down this path, I might cross that finish line and I might get that record, but I would do it broken. I decided to reevaluate. I now set a new timeline to become the youngest woman. And while this pivot might be perceived as a failure by some, I had to remind myself that it was a strategic adjustment to get back into my stretch zone, to prioritize my joy in learning while still feeling challenged. And trust me, there were many challenges. During my race in Brazil, I nearly didn't make it because of visa issues, and when I finally got there, my bike was broken. I got so sick on the bike in Spain with over 155 kilometers left and the whole marathon. And I dealt with electrolyte imbalances in Hawaii that caused severe damage to my feet, with countless other physical and mental challenges. But making mistakes was how I learned. 4 races in and 2 more to go, I find myself amazed at what can happen in just over a year. By living in my stretch zone, I've learned more about myself than I ever have before. I've learned to surround myself with people that inspire me. These are just a few. I've learned the moments of joy are so much more valuable when you know the hard times you've had to get through. And I know that it doesn't have to mean failure to reevaluate the timeline and adjust your goals to stay in the sweet spot. On top of that, I've learned that my side quests can teach me how to live my main quests. I'm no longer scared I'll give up when given a hard problem at work, and I know that failure is more about how I adjust and respond than what actually happened. By living in my stretch zone and creating a safe space to fail, I've created the perfect conditions for my growth. Now, not all stretch goals need to be Ironmans or world records. But if you took one of your own side quests and you stretched it, what could you discover about yourself? When we stretch our side quests, we stretch ourselves, and that's where the best versions of us are waiting. So ask yourself, where do you fall on this curve right now? And how can you make your way into the stretch zone?